At 11:15 that night, the boy stopped outside room 12 and tightened his fingers around the drawing in his hands. Inside, an old man who had grown used to empty chairs, looked toward the doorway and quietly asked, "Is he here to see someone?" The nurse smiled. "Yes," she said, "he came to see you. If stories about small acts of kindness remind you how much one person can matter, stay with me, because this one begins with an empty chair." His name was Walter Bennett. He was 78 years old, soft-spoken, gray-haired, and almost always awake long after the hospital corridor had gone quiet. The nurses on the evening shift knew him simply as the man in room 12. Not because he complained. Walter rarely complained about anything. He thanked people when they adjusted his blanket. He apologized when he needed help reaching something. And every night, before the lights in the hallway were dimmed, he would ask the same question. "Visiting hours are finished now, aren't they?" The answer was usually yes. Walter would nod. Then he would look toward the empty chair beside his bed as though he had expected nothing else. Walter had lived alone for several years. His wife had passed away. Old friends had moved away, grown older themselves, or simply drifted out of his life. He had once been close to a nephew who lived far away. But they rarely spoke anymore. There had been no dramatic argument, no terrible betrayal. Life had simply become quieter, then quieter still. Walter never blamed anyone. That somehow made it harder to watch. On his bedside table were three things he kept perfectly arranged: his glasses, a small paperback book, and a framed photograph of himself and his wife when they were much younger. Every evening, Walter would straighten that photograph before trying to sleep. One night, a nurse asked him about it. "That was Margaret," he said. He smiled when he said her name. It was one of the few times anyone saw him smile. "She could talk to anybody," he continued. "A cashier, a bus driver, a stranger on a park bench." 5 minutes later, they were friends. Walter looked at the empty chair beside his bed. "I was never very good at that." Then he changed the subject. The nurse who spent the most time with Walter was Elena Parker. She worked nights. She was 36, practical pantal, and often tired in the quiet way working parents become tired. Elena had a 9-year-old son named Noah. Most evenings, Noah stayed with Elena's sister while Elena worked. And almost every morning, when Elena returned home, Noah asked about the hospital. "Did anybody get better? Did anybody do something funny? Did you help somebody?" Elena never shared private details. She simply told him little things. Someone had finally finished a whole bowl of soup. Someone had laughed at a joke. Someone had been able to sit beside a window and enjoy the sunrise. But one morning, while Elena was making breakfast, Noah noticed that she seemed distracted. "Bad night?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "Not bad." "Then what?" She hesitated. "There's a gentleman who gets lonely sometimes." Noah looked up from his cereal. "Doesn't anybody visit him?" "Not really." "Why?" Elena thought about the question. There was no simple answer. Sometimes people end up alone without meaning to. Noah became quiet. A few moments later he asked, "Does he like drawings?" Elena laughed softly. "I have no idea." That afternoon Noah disappeared into his room with a box of colored pencils. When he returned, he carried a sheet of paper. He had drawn a crooked little house beneath a huge yellow sun. Beside the house were 3 stick figures. And across the top, in uneven letters, he had written, "Hope you have a good night." "Can you give it to him?" Noah asked. Elena looked at the drawing, then at her son. "I think he'd like that." For the next few days, the drawing stayed safely inside Elena's work bag. She kept meaning to bring it into Walter's room, but something always interrupted her: a call, another patient needing help, another task that could not wait. Then one evening, shortly before Elena's shift, her sister called. Something unexpected had come up. She could not watch Noah that night. Elena called around, trying to find another solution. Eventually, another relative agreed to pick Noah up later. But for a short time at the beginning of Elena's shift, Noah needed to stay with her in a staff waiting area. Before leaving home, Noah grabbed his drawing. "You still haven't given it to him?" Elena smiled. "No, I haven't." "Can I?" She almost immediately said no. Then she looked at him. "You can't wander around." "I won't, and you have to listen to everything I say." "I will." Elena thought about Walter, about the empty chair, about the way he looked toward the door every evening, even though he claimed he was not expecting anyone. She checked with the appropriate staff. A short supervised visit could be arranged. So later that evening, when the hallway had grown quiet, Elena stood outside room 12 with her son. Suddenly, Noah became nervous. What do I say? Elena crouched beside him. You don't have to say anything special. What if he doesn't like kids? Then we stay for 1 minute, give him your drawing and leave. Noah nodded. Elena knocked gently. Walter was awake. He was sitting in bed with his glasses on and his book resting unopened in his lap. Come in. Elena stepped inside first. Walter, I have someone I'd like you to meet. Noah appeared behind her. Walter stared at him, then at Elena, then back at the boy. Noah held the drawing against his chest. Hello, he said. Walter slowly put his book aside. Well, hello. Noah walked closer. My mom said somebody here might need this. He held out the drawing. Walter accepted it carefully. For several seconds, he said nothing. His eyes moved across the crooked house, the enormous sun, the stick figures, then the words written across the top. Hope you have a good night. Walter swallowed. You made this? Noah nodded. For me? Another nod. Walter looked toward Elena. She could see his eyes beginning to fill. He immediately looked back down at the paper. It's very good, he said. Noah smiled. I messed up the roof. Walter studied the picture seriously. I think the roof is the best part. Noah laughed. It was such an ordinary sound, but in that quiet hospital room it seemed enormous. Elena pulled the visitor chair a little closer. Noah sat down. Walter kept holding the drawing. For the next 10 minutes, they talked, mostly about simple things, school, dogs, which ice cream flavor was best, and whether old black and white movies were boring. Noah believed they were. Walter strongly disagreed. At one point, Noah noticed the photograph beside Walter's bed. Who's that? Walter picked it up. My wife. Was she nice? Walter smiled. The nicest. Did she like movies? She loved them. Noah thought about that. Even the black and white ones. Walter laughed. A real laugh. Elena had never heard it before. When Noah's ride arrived, he stood beside Walter's bed. I have to go. Walter nodded. Thank you for coming. Noah pointed at the drawing. You can keep that. Walter smiles. I was hoping you would say that. Noah reached the doorway, then he turned around. Mr. Walter? Yes, I can make another one. Walter's face changed, only slightly, but Elena saw it. It was the expression of someone hearing the possibility of a tomorrow he had not expected. I'd like that very much. The drawing went up on the wall beside Walter's bed. Elena taped it where he could see it easily. The following week, Noah made another picture. This one showed a dog wearing a cape. Walter insisted it was clearly the finest piece of art in the entire hospital. A few days later, Elena brought Noah for another short visit. This time, Walter was waiting. His hair was combed, his bedside table had been straightened, and the visitor chair was already pulled closer to the bed. Noah brought a small puzzle. Walter pretended not to know how to solve it. Noah spent 20 minutes explaining every step. The visits did not happen every night. Sometimes an entire week passed, but Walter stopped asking only when visiting hours ended. Now sometimes, he asked Elena something else. Do you think your boy might come by again? Elena would smile. He's already working on another drawing. Walter began talking more with the staff too, not dramatically, not all at once, but little things changed. He learned that one nurse had a new puppy. He asked another staff member about her garden. He began sitting near his doorway sometimes instead of keeping the room closed. One afternoon, Elena entered room 12 and discovered several drawings lined up along the wall. Walter pointed at them proudly. I'm building a collection. Then he reached into the drawer beside his bed. Inside was a small envelope. On the front, he had written Noah's name. Would you give this to him? Elena smiled. What is it? Nothing important. That evening, Noah opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for reminding an old man that people can still knock on his door. Noah read it twice, then he looked at his mother. Can I keep this forever? Elena nodded. I think you should. Several weeks later, Walter was preparing to leave the hospital for continued care elsewhere. Elena helped gather his belongings, his glasses, his book, the photograph of Margaret. Then Walter carefully removed Noah's drawings from the wall. You're taking all of them? Elena asked. Walter looked almost offended. Of course, she laughed. As she packed them safely between two folders, Walter became quiet. I spent a long time thinking nobody came because nobody remembered me. Elena stopped packing. Walter looked toward the chair where Noah had sat. Your boy didn't know anything about me. No, he didn't know whether I deserved company. Elena shook her head. He just thought you might want some. Walter smiled. That's a remarkable way to look at people. Before leaving, Walter asked Elena for one final favor. Tell Noah his roof drawing is still the best one. Elena grinned. He's going to remind you of that forever. Walter looked down at the stack of drawings. I hope he does. Sometimes loneliness isn't broken by a grand rescue, sometimes it changes because one person walks through a door carrying nothing more than a chair, a conversation, or a child's crooked drawing. Walter had spent years believing an empty chair simply meant nobody was coming. A 9-year-old boy helped him see it differently. Sometimes an empty chair is only waiting for someone to choose it. If this story touched you, comment, kindness lives here. And if someone once showed up for you during a lonely season of your life, share that memory in the comments. Because somewhere, someone may need the reminder that being remembered can begin with something very small.